Well, welcome to the Stone Church podcast. We are excited to be here with Missa Uhlman. Missa Uhlman is in the house, and this is the first in what we are calling our Deeper series, just looking to deepen and strengthen our walk with Jesus. And as we were talking about Missa, these podcasts for 2025 and deeper, we thought about the topic of apologetics, and your name came up immediately. And so we're super stoked to have you.
Yeah.
So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited. I'm excited to nerd out on apologetics with everybody, and it's something that I love to talk about. So I'm happy to be here.
Yes. So a ton of people know you, but for those that don't, can you share just a bit about your story, your journey, your family?
Yeah.
Give a little background.
My name's Missa Uhlman. I have lived in Yakima for about 8 years now with my husband. We have 3 kids, 3
Raised
boys.
in Olympic Peninsula.
Well, yeah. So Bainbridge Island,
Yes.
so our fellow
Come on.
Kitsap
Peninsula.
So, but we've lived here, and we have 3 boys who are 8, 10, and 12. And so I was an audiologist for a long time, and did a lot of work with cochlear implants and really loved that. And then in 2020, when the whole world fell apart, we decided to start homeschooling. And so that's what we did. So I've been homeschooling. This is our 5th year homeschooling. I stopped working, and now I'm a full-time homeschooler and apologetics nerd.
Yeah. Okay, so you have a certificate from Biola University in apologetics.
Right.
And so what kind of intrigued you about apologetics? What led you to pursue that?
Yeah. Well, so, kids ask a lot of questions, and I think my kids ask a ton. And what I was finding as we were talking about Jesus, talking about God, talking about the Bible and our faith, their questions hadn't gotten too hard yet at that point. This is like 2018 when all of this started. Their questions hadn't gotten too hard yet, but I knew that they would soon. And I knew that I needed good answers in order to talk with them about things, because they were asking good questions. And so I remember talking with someone who recommended the book Mama Bear Apologetics.
Yes.
And so I went and checked it out, and I liked it. I liked that it kind of took all these different things that are going on in our society and different questions that people have, and they break them down in ways that you can talk about with your kids. And so that kind of got me started. From there, I discovered Alisa Childers.
Yes.
So some of my fellow 90s folks will remember that she was in the band Zoe Girl.
Oh, that's right. Yes, I've heard that. Yeah.
And so she kind of went through this crisis of faith, and she started looking for her own answers, and she ended up getting into apologetics, and now she has a podcast. And so I got into her podcast, and it was like a whole new world opened up for me. There were just all these things that I had never really thought about, never really asked questions about before. I became a believer when I was about 12, and I had grown over the years a solid faith. And I felt very convicted in my faith. I felt very just sure. But I also realized around this time that my faith was based on my own personal experiences and my own convictions and the ways that I had seen God move in my life and things like that. And all of that is great.
Yes.
I don't want to diminish the power of our testimony, because there is power there and there's value there. But I think what I realized is that what I had, or what I would tell someone who was an unbeliever, was not really different from someone who was an earnest believer in Islam.
Yeah.
Or I know that for members of the Mormon church, the LDS church, they'll talk about the burning in the bosom. And what I had was not really much different than that,
Because they might say, well, you've had that experience, but I've had this experience.
Right.
And so what makes your belief system
right? And then I sputter out and
Yeah.
say, it's not, sounds the same. So, so I started really looking at what am I doing? What am I believing and why am I believing it? There have to be reasons beyond just how I feel, because our feelings are fickle.
Yep.
Our feelings can change from one minute to the next. And just because I believe something is true doesn't make it true.
Mm-hmm.
So I really started looking for these different answers, and the amazing thing is that people, intelligent people have been asking questions for 2,000 years.
Yeah.
And so these answers are out there. And so I started really just consuming everything that I could in apologetics, books, podcasts, all these different things. Really just enjoying just getting information, that I hadn't had before. And then I ended up deciding to do the certificate program in apologetics.
Which probably entailed you're learning, you're reading, you're studying, you're in conversation.
Yeah.
That was probably fairly exhaustive.
Yeah, it was, and it was so great to hear, speakers and lecturers who I wasn't really familiar with in some cases, or sometimes I had read their books,
Mm-hmm.
and then to be able to really hear what they're speaking to and learn and grow.
Because like
from
a
them.
Sean McDowell would be
Right.
someone at Biola.
Right, yeah,
And
William Lane Craig.
Yes.
Yeah. So, some big name people, and then some people that I had no idea who they were, but after hearing them, it was like, wow, these are experts in this field or in their particular area, and it was just a really awesome time of growth for me in my faith.
You mentioned Mama Bear Apologetics,
Mm-hmm.
and so if there are moms who are watching this podcast, is that a book that you recommend as a mom of kids? That's a good maybe resource?
Yeah, I think it is a good resource. I think it's just a good thing to. It was a good way for me to start thinking about the different issues that our kids will encounter. Being a Christian in 2024 is different from being a Christian in 1994 when I was a Christian. And so, our kids are going to encounter some different things that I didn't encounter. And so I think Mama Bear Apologetics, that book is a great resource for that. Natasha Crane is another person that I really like when it comes to resources to talk about God with our kids.
So those are some people, some trusted people, the Alyssa Childers, Natasha Crane, that if we see their podcasts, their books, those are people that you feel good about.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely recommend them. I think they're solid, and I've learned a lot from them.
I do think that what you said about the culture that we live in today, in now 2025 being so different than the 90s, that it is a different culture, and I think it almost in some ways requires kind of something different even for our faith in the area of apologetics, because there's this book called Meet Gen Z that talks about how we now live in a culture that is very post-Christian. And that is filled with, it's very pluralistic, I think is the term, to where back in the day, 70s, 80s, 90s, there was almost this sacred canopy, they say, that covered all of society, that what you were teaching at home was similar to what was being taught even in some ways at school by your neighbors and even by the church that you were a part of. Whereas now, today, that one sacred canopy has been replaced by a million smaller canopies that people can choose to dwell under, and every one of those is considered equally valid and equally true.
For sure. Yeah. Well, and that your last point is exactly what I think of when you say that. I think it's been replaced by this idea that truth is not objective. Truth is a subjective thing. You do what's good for you, I'll do what's good for me, and all of those can be equally true. And the thing is, they're not. In order for something to be true, something has to be false. And I think that our kids need us to tell them that and to say, hey, a lot of people are going to tell you, you do what you want to do, I'll do what I want to do. And that's fine, but that's not truth. Those things aren't all true.
What are some things that you guys have done? So with apologetics and with your boys, what are some things that you guys have done with okay, we got the culture that's out there too, equip them, encourage them. Let's say there's parents that are watching that. How old is Gabe?
Gabe's 12.
Okay, 12.
Size 10, and then Eli's 8.
Okay, so they're right there, and they're coming into this season of life where they're asking real questions. And it's going to even become more. What are some things that you guys have done or are doing to kind of just equip them?
I mean, I think probably the biggest thing is just having discussions with them. You know, we're a family who talks a lot. We all talk a lot. And, but I really just, you know, we have great discussions with them. And my goal for them is to be critical thinkers about everything, you know, not just about their faith, about everything, but especially their faith, because that shapes their worldview. And so I want them to be able to think critically about things, ask questions, and know how to find some answers, you know? And I think the big thing for me is, you know, we don't have any control over whether our kids will stay walking in their Christian walk. But if they fall away from the faith, I want them to walk away from the true Jesus and true Christianity. I don't want them to walk away because they believed some straw man Christianity that was held up for them on Instagram, you know?
And we have that's something that we have aspired to do in our home too. And I think it's important to make our home a place where we can ask the tough questions. And I think that's the beautiful thing about Christianity is I would tell the girls, listen, this is true. You seek truth, it will lead you to Jesus, it will lead you to Christianity, and making our home a place where we can have those difficult conversations and even start those conversations young.
Yeah, for sure. You brought up Sean McDowell earlier, and one of one of the things that he has said is that, so his dad, Josh McDowell, is a very well-known apologist.
He's like a legend.
Yeah, for sure. And so I remember hearing Sean say that, you know, when he got older, I mean, he grew up obviously in a Christian home. When he got older, he went to his dad and said, you know, I'm actually having some doubts about my faith. I'm not really sure that this is true. And he thought he was going to be, you know, upset, like, oh no. And Josh McDowell was like, that's great, you know, because he knew that for Sean to have an authentic faith that was his own, he needed to wrestle with these things. He needed to ask some questions. He needed to pursue answers on his own. And that's what all of our kids have to do. You know, they should not believe something because we believe it, and they should not believe it because it's a tradition. They need to believe things because they're true, and they need to have evidence to fall back on.
Yeah, and so if someone is watching and they're like, what are apologetics? How would you describe or define apologetics?
So before I got into this, apologetics sounded like you were apologizing for
I'm sorry.
Yes. Sorry, I'm a Christian. And then I started kind of getting into this idea that apologetics meant you needed to be inclined to argument. You know, apologetics is for combative people who want to get in there and have like a yelling match, which is not something that I aspire to do.
People.
Yeah, I'm not a debater. So, but apologetics just means giving a reason for your faith, giving a defense for your faith, having logical arguments, having evidence there to support what you believe. And for me, you know, as an audiologist, as someone in the healthcare profession, I realized, you know, with shame that I didn't approach any other part of my life like this. I didn't approach any part of my life with blind faith like I did, you know, Christianity at that point. You know, any treatment that I would suggest for my patients, anything that I would do for them, it was all based on research. It was all based on, you know, tons of research that had been done, and you know, physical scientific truths that were, you know, that are going on in the body. And you know, if I'm treating my child for sickness, I'm not going to just throw a bunch of medication at them. I'm going to actually take their temperature, you know, like figure out what's going on. And I realized, man, I don't do that with Christianity. Why is that? You know? And so it was like a total breath of fresh air to start finding these answers to you know, support the things that I knew were true, but then to be able to share that with other people.
Yeah, I think it's super important. Even reflecting upon, I think the Bible even really challenges us to really give thought to our faith,
Yeah.
to be able to give a reasoned defense. I think of like 1 Peter 3:15, always be prepared to give an answer
Yeah.
for the reason, for the hope that
Yeah.
you have. I think about Paul in Acts 17. He's in Athens, and he gave a reasoned defense for
Yeah.
his faith. And I was just in my Bible reading just the other day, and was reading and listening to the Bible, and I think it was in Galatians, where it talks about how he says, I think I am just astounded or astonished that you are turning to a gospel that is no gospel at all.
Yeah.
And obviously I was thinking about this podcast,
Yeah.
and that went through my mind. Like Paul's like, how on earth are you turning from the true gospel?
Right.
So we need to know what is the true gospel. And so I
Yeah.
think there's a biblical element of being equipped and able to speak to, why we believe what we believe.
Absolutely.
And then I also feel that it does something for my own faith. That there's
Yeah.
I heard that this illustration years ago about how imagine that you were going to fly somewhere, and you went. There was 2 planes and 2 pilots.
Okay.
There was one plane that was junky, broken down, rusting, hadn't been maintained in 30 years, and the pilot's drunk.
Nice.
Or okay, so
Sounds good.
that's option number 1. The other option is Air Force One
Okay.
with 3 military trained pilots. And they said, okay, you've got to fly somewhere. Which plane are you going to choose? Well, we're all taking Air Force One
Right.
with the military trained pilots. And the point was, to get on either one of those planes requires faith.
Yeah.
But which plane do you have more confidence in?
Sure.
And I think that's what apologetics
Yeah.
does. It gives us confidence.
Absolutely. And I think that's exactly right. There are always going to be questions that we can't answer.
Yeah, there's gonna be faith,
always
yeah.
going to be faith involved. But knowing Christianity, knowing the truths of Christianity, and being able to fall back on those when things around us are uncertain or unstable. That means a lot, that we're not called as Christians to just check our intellect at the door.
Yes.
We have real things that we can base our faith on.
Absolutely. All right. So what are some, in your studies, in your reading, what are some different apologetics that have been encouraging for your faith?
Yeah. So, I think probably one of the main ones it's called the Cosmological Argument.
Okay.
And basically what it says is that we have good evidence that shows that there was a beginning. There's a beginning to time, there's a beginning to space, there's a beginning to matter. And so, they're able to trace back kind of the echoes of the universe back to whatever you want to call it, a Big Bang. Some event happened to start all of this. And so we know that an event that has a beginning has to have something begin it. It doesn't just happen from nothing. And I've heard, different people have different explanations. There were just a bunch of gases that came together and suddenly kaboom, or Richard Dawkins likes to talk about aliens seeding, whatever. The thing is, you have to keep going back. What started that? Where did that come from? Where did this all begin? And so we can logically say that if space, time, and matter had a beginning, then the thing that started that has to be timeless, spaceless, and immaterial. And that would be a definition for God.
So that's like the thought of creation needs a creator.
Yeah, creation needs a creator. And we can see that around us. I kind of had an interesting experience with my 10-year-old, Cyrus. He said, so we homeschool, and he said this year he was interested in learning about evolution from someone who actually believes in evolution.
Oh my goodness. And that's your 10-year-old.
Isn't that funny? Do you see what I'm dealing with here? Yeah, this isn't like, he's got us on the ropes all the time. So
we're gonna have Cy on the podcast next.
He'd be all over that.
He'd probably do well.
He would probably do great.
Do well.
So he wanted to do that, and I said, yeah, that sounds good. So I found, he was interested in biology, so I found a biology class, and it is from a secular perspective, and so it gave us some great opportunities to sit and talk about things. And I remember in particular one question, he got kind of a true-false question, and it said, the beginning of life is too complex for us to attribute it to chance.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And he's so funny. We call him our 70-year-old trapped in a child's body because he is an old man. And he goes, I think they want me to say that that's false. Because he was right. You know, the answer to the question was something like, even though life is very complex, we don't have good evidence to say that it couldn't just have happened by chance. And it was a good time for him and I to talk about actually another apologetics argument, the teleological argument, which says that, you know, complex things need design. And we had a conversation. One of the classic examples is like if you found a watch out in the middle of the woods, would you think that got there naturally, you know, that it just happened, or did somebody have to put it there? Did someone have to design this watch? You know, and we were talking even like a paper airplane. It doesn't even have any moving parts, you know. It's not as complex as a watch. It's so much simpler. Could that have ended up in the woods by itself, you know? And so how much more complex are we, you know, living things than a watch or a paper airplane?
Yes, that is it the teleological argument, is that what it's called? And is this, so it's what, basically it says that the earth is so intricate and complex.
Right. That it couldn't have happened by accident.
A designer.
Yeah.
To design it.
And that's the thing, you know, even if you look back and say, okay, there's Big Bang and space-time and material forms, you know, we know that things don't get more orderly just by chance. And you just have to visit my house to tell you that, right? Like if I don't put any work into actually making my home orderly, it will be chaos in about 3 hours.
Yeah.
3 boys, 3 hours.
Yes.
You know, so like we know that doesn't happen in nature. If you let a forest, you know, just go, it doesn't become more orderly. It becomes more chaotic.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it's reasonable for us to think that life coming together, complexity, it requires design. It requires purpose and intention.
Yeah,
for
it's
that
like
to happen.
if we are walking in the Sahara Desert and come upon this massive skyscraper.
Right.
Our first thought is not going to be, wow, that was an incredible windstorm that put that skyscraper together. We would think there was an architect and there was a builder and someone put that together.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's insane when you look at the complexity of the earth. I was intrigued by, I think it's called the Biosphere 2.
Okay.
And it is this, back in, I think it was the late 80s, all these really smart people got together and they said, let's create this Biosphere 2, which is basically this 3-acre greenhouse. And they said, we are going to basically create all the complex systems for plant life and animal life. And we're going to put people in this 3-acre biosphere and we're going to seal them in there for 2 years.
Nice.
And in the early 90s, 8 people,
no, really?
yes, were sealed in there. I think they're called the Biosphereans.
Oh,
you can Google it. And what
sounds like a movie.
It totally does. And what was intriguing to me is these are the smartest people that just really embarked on this massive research science project to do this. And the moment they sealed him in there, within a period of time, oxygen levels began to get off, plant life began to die. And what the director said was so intriguing to me. He said, basically, the earth is too complex to recreate it.
Yeah, to replicate it.
Yeah, you can't replicate all the complexity of the earth. And that is so intriguing to me because what you've got these astrophysicists who say like the probability of of being able to recreate just how the earth is designed is what, like 1 in 10 with like 130 zeros after it.
Yeah.
It's just impossible.
It's crazy. It's crazy. Yeah. And that we can survive here, that the earth is the way that it is, that it's fine tuned to the point where, we have the gases in the atmosphere to be able to breathe that have to be within this, very small
on like a
range.
razor's edge.
Yeah.
Right?
And here it is, here we are. We're the right distance from the sun to be able to have things grow and have the heat we need and, not be too hot and not be too cold, all these different things. I was even listening to something recently on another podcast, and it was talking about how we, our position in the universe is, in our galaxy is actually the right place for us to be able to do science and study things. So it's not even just this is where we need to be to live and to have life. It's that, I think it's a testament to the idea that God wants us to know him.
Yeah.
He wants us to be able to explore his creation. And so where we are positioned means we can see the important part of the light spectrum that we need to be able to see in order to observe things in our galaxy. We're the right, our atmosphere is the right makeup so that we have a clear atmosphere and we can see out of it, that kind of thing. So it's really fascinating that it's for our life to happen, and it's also for us to be able to, investigate.
Yeah, it's like what the Bible says, that the heavens declare the glory of
Yeah.
God. And for me, I'll never forget what one of my professors said in college. He said, when I look at just faith and Christianity, the Bible, he said, this makes the most sense to me.
Yeah.
And with all that we're talking about, all the proper oxygen levels, the distance we are from the sun, the ocean modulating the temperature of the earth, for me, it takes less faith to believe in God than it does to believe that, like you talked about, everything being balanced on that razor's edge, that just came to be by chance. So to me, it takes, again, Frank Turek's book.
Yeah, I was just gonna say
you're
that.
probably thinking like it takes less faith for me to believe in God than to believe in atheism.
It's less of a jump.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. It's less of a jump. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've got what's called the cosmological
Yep,
argument,
so
right?
the cosmological
law of cause and
argument.
effect. We've got the teleological, which speaks to the design and order of the universe. Others.
Yeah. One that is one of my favorites, it's called the moral argument. And so it says that morality is objective, okay? We know that murder, lying, stealing, torturing, we know that that's wrong, right? And that transcends cultural norms. We all just know that that's wrong. And we see that, you don't have to teach your 2-year-old to lie.
Yeah.
You don't have to teach your 2-year-old to snatch what they want or anything like that. That all comes naturally to us because of sin, but we know that it's wrong.
Yeah.
You also don't have to teach your 2-year-old to hide it when they do, right?
Yeah.
They know it's wrong. And so the moral argument says that, that God's moral law is written in us, and the Bible does say, the moral that God's law is written on our hearts.
Romans 2, right?
Yeah, and so we see that, and one of the reasons why I really like this argument is because to me it really explains. It's the only thing I think that explains how we, our humanness, how we are to relate to each other and how we're to treat each other. I think no matter what your religious beliefs are, I think that we all agree we're supposed to treat each other with justice. We're supposed to treat each other with respect. We're supposed to treat each other with kindness. Those are things that we value, that everybody values. And the thing is, if we're not created in the image of God, that really has no standing. If we're just a mass of atoms and we're all here by accident or by chance, and when we die, we just nothing, then there really isn't any good reason why I should treat you with respect.
Yeah.
There's really no good reason for us to pursue any sort of justice in our society, or anything like that, or to teach our kids kindness. It really doesn't matter. And so the moral argument says, we know that it does matter, and that points to God.
Yes.
There's a good quote from C.S. Lewis that I like, and he said that, what did he say? He said that a man knows a line is crooked only because he has some idea of what a straight line is. And I think that when we look at the world around us and we look at our culture and we say, oh, that's unjust, or that's unkind, the only reason we know that is because we have some semblance of what justice is and what kindness is. If we didn't, we wouldn't be able to call things.
So it's almost like every time a person says that is good or that is evil, they are basically acknowledging the existence of God.
Yeah.
Because without the existence of God, we have no framework to know what is good, what is evil.
Yeah.
And you could even take it to, if we had a picture of Mother Teresa and then Adolf Hitler.
Right.
And then say, okay, who was a better person? Without God, there is no framework to say who was right, who was wrong, who was better, who was worse. Now, what we would say is, yeah, exactly. It doesn't matter. Yeah. Now, what we know, because like you mentioned Romans, I think it's Romans 2 or Romans, like God has written that on our heart.
Yeah.
Right? We know, well, Mother Teresa was far better, obviously.
Right.
But without God, you have no basis to know that, because you need an outside and objective truth to identify.
You need a measuring stick.
You need a measuring stick. And so if someone says, well, of course Mother Teresa is better, but they don't believe in God, I would say, well, says who?
Right.
Says who?
Right. Yeah.
Without God, you have no basis for saying that. And yet we all know, well, of course she was better. So that speaks to the existence of God.
Yeah. Absolutely. I have a mug that says, according to what standard?
Yeah.
And it speaks to that very thing. We make judgment calls all the time on morality, but we have to have a measuring stick if we're going to talk about morality. It can't be subjective, because that's not.
Yeah, and
there's
that
no
is
framework
so
for that.
wild to me. Every time someone says, that's right, that's wrong, that's evil.
They're stealing from the idea that God exists. God has to exist if good and evil exist.
Yeah. And that, so there's also, you mentioned the humanness of humanity, the anthropic principle. And so it's basically, that speaks to just how we're created, right?
Right. I mean, the fact that we are, I would say as a believer that we're made in the image of God, that we're able to think about our behaviors, that makes us different from any other created, any other creature on the planet. The fact that we're able to, the fact that I'm able to look at how I'm acting and analyze that.
Yes.
That's different from how a dog works.
Yes.
How anything else works. And so, there is something different about us that is not just an evolution from other creatures.
Yeah.
There's something definitively different.
Yeah. And I think it was Darwin himself who said to suppose that all the detail of an eye, like the thought that could just be thrown together by chance, he even acknowledged is ridiculous.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, is he got to a point in his argument where he had to say, and here's where here's where my
argument falls
gets
short.
off, because at some point the idea that, we've got a single cell, and then we've got, a multi-cell critter, and then we've got, whatever. And it goes on from there to a cow, to a whale, to an ape. And then to us, there's something missing there.
Yeah. I was intrigued. I think his name was Anthony Flew or Antony Flew. He was this I think he was a professor at Oxford.
Okay.
And he was an atheist for a number of years. And he would write articles, and atheists and other professors, they would look to his articles. And later in life, he came to faith. And Lee Strobel, this famous apologist who you know about, interviewed him and said, what was it that made you kind of come to faith? And it was this very thing, the anthropic principle, how we're made, was just instrumental to this well-known, highly regarded atheist actually coming to faith.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. It's pretty crazy. And this is the stuff where, if you don't check your intellect at the door, if you don't just sort of blindly believe, there's so much here. It's like a buffet of information. There's so much here to support what we believe.
Yeah, because
we don't have to just believe it.
Yes, because in my mind, okay, this is my answer. This makes the most sense to me. This is where I believe the evidence leads me. Now, if you don't believe this, then what is your answer?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's an important part of the conversation as well. Is, okay, if you don't believe, what are your answer for all these really massive questions in life?
Right. And that's a really good point, Jeff, because I think most people don't think about it.
Exactly. They just say, well, I don't believe in God. Okay, then what is your answer for all of this?
Right. I mean, as someone who, I've been a Christian for a long time, I consider myself a thinking person. I didn't think about this stuff for a long time because it's just sort of there, it's just sort of ingrained, kind of like how we're all just sort of swimming in culture, the fish doesn't really know about the water. And so it's just kind of there. And until you step back and think and ask some questions, you're like, why do I believe that? I don't know. It's pretty interesting.
Who are, let's say people are watching and they want to go a little deeper, learn a little bit more, read some books, watch some podcasts. Who are some people that you have appreciated that maybe they'll come up to you at church, or maybe they're watching from somewhere else, but who are some people that you've appreciated?
I know, I feel like I need to, it's like an Oscars thing, right? Thank you to so-and-so, so-and-so, all the people who made my apologetics.
Whether it's their parents, for their kids, I mean, just all that.
Yeah. So, we mentioned Elisa Childers.
Yes.
She's a great apologist, and I think she has an excellent, really approachable podcast. For the person who's not really, a scholar necessarily. She has done, most recently has done a lot of work sort of exposing the issues with progressive Christianity.
Oh, yes.
So that's kind of her specialty now. But if you were to go to her podcast, her older episodes, she has a huge, amazing range of topics on there for sort of the lay apologist, just the person who wants to learn more, grow in their faith, answer questions, get questions answered, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and progressive Christianity, I mean, that's something that I think Christians need to be aware of today too, because it's a dangerous belief system that basically believes we're kind of progressing out of historical Christianity.
It takes
and so they're denying
from,
core doctrines of the faith, denying the Bible. And so, man, all of these things for our own faith, but also as parents, as grandparents, we need to be aware of these things.
And that stuff's insidious. It's not. It calls itself Christianity, right?
Yes.
And so that's the stuff that our kids really need to know their Bibles. They really need to know, traditional Christian doctrine, because when someone puts something out in front of them that is a false gospel, they need to know that, even if it's under the guise of Christianity.
Yeah. Okay, Elisa Childers.
Elisa Childers, you mentioned Frank Turek.
Yes.
He and Norm Geisler have a book that I love. It's called I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist.
Okay.
And they do a really great job. I think they're kind of like 12 steps in it. And they walk you from step 1, which is truth objective and can we know it? All the way up through things like, is there good evidence that God exists? How do we know that the Bible is true?
Gotcha.
are the eyewitness accounts, the gospel's credible?
Rela-
All the way up to, can we believe Jesus is who he says he is? And they just give a really good layout of each of these things to where you can really see a very logical progression from that step one, can we know truth, to, is this true? Is there evidence for the resurrection? Is all these different things. So their book is excellent, and I really recommend that one.
And is he crossexamined.org,
Yeah, so
right?
he does
So
cross-examined.
Okay.
So crossexamined.org is a great website for resources. He also has a podcast called "I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist,"
Okay.
and so he looks at all sorts of different things. So yeah, he's a great one. Stand to Reason is a really great website with resources and articles and things like that, just answering questions.
Yes.
What else? Let's see. Mama Bear Apologetics also has a podcast. I'm trying to think. Other ones that I had noted. Natasha Crane has books. She has one called Talking with Your Kids About God, Talking with Your Kids About Jesus. She has a couple different ones, and she has a podcast as well.
And you really, would you agree? You really can't start too young.
No.
Right? And I think the conversation's obviously age appropriate, but even if your kids are 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, have an age appropriate conversation about how God created the world, and that you can't start too young.
No, you can't. A couple of years ago, I did a little comparative religions thing with my oldest, particularly my oldest, Gabe, who was probably 9 or 10 at the time. And we sat down and we made a table, and we looked at kind of the 8 major world religions. And so as we would learn about each of them, he would go through and he would fill in this table. Who was the founder? What's their place of worship called?
Yeah.
What is their idea of God? What is their path to salvation? All these different things. And even as a 9 or 10-year-old, he started seeing these things come out, like the fact that these religions contradict each other. They're not the same things. So, for someone to say, well, all religions just lead, they're all just different pathways to God, they actually contradict each other, And so going back to, truth, if one of these is true, and according, on the table, maybe it's not Christianity, but if one of these is true, this other one is not.
Yes.
They can't both be true.
Yeah.
It was also interesting for him to see, sort of where Christianity's basis is for a historical event. It's the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus. It is not this person who went and had a vision under a tree by himself and now has relayed this information to us that we believe,
Because with
very
Christianity,
different.
you have historical places, historical people, evidence to support the claims. It's significant.
It's a total night and day thing. So I think, starting at an early age, our kids are smart and they're asking good questions. And like you said, it can be age appropriate, and it's not just going to be one conversation. It's going to keep going and become a full discussion over years.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Missa, thank you for coming on.
Yeah,
Would you
thank you
come
for
back
having
on
me.
another time
Yeah,
for round 2 of Apologetics?
Absolutely. I love it. I think it's great that we're doing this, and I love that our church cares about this. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.